I hope everybody's here. So what we're talking about, we've been talking about trust, engagement, but now we're going to talk about audience metrics, looking ahead to new revenue models and how we can actually make money. This is just how to make money for the content that we're doing. And I would like to introduce Keith Robinson from Global. What is your exact title? I don't have it. I'm sorry. Whoa. Let me back up. Digital Products, Business Development at Global News Corus Radio. Apologies for that, Keith. Take it over.
Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, so this is actually a topic we tend to return to each year, and with good reason, which is, we continue to notice that the audience is moving online. But how do we monetize news online? Since we met last year, we've seen an erosion continuing in terms of the on-air audience, and we've noticed that some small market newspapers are shuttering as traditional revenue sources decline. Well, there's no silver bullet when it comes to monetizing the digital space. There are some strategies that are more effective than others. And so joining me to discuss the latest developments we have Jennifer Bergen, who is the Director of Digital Sales and iHeartRadio Operations for Bell Media. And we have Mladen Raickovic, Head of Canada Global Partnerships with Google, and Robin Neufeld, Director of Content Marketing for the CBC. So maybe we'll start with, we actually had a whole panel on it earlier today, but what's old is new again in terms of podcasting is once again a very hot topic. A lot of people are racing in terms of content. We've seen it be very successful south of the border and now in Canada. But I guess the question is anyone making money off of podcasting? So I'll turn that over to Jen.
Oh, thank you. So I guess the answer would be we're at the initial stages. So even though the capability for podcasting has been around for many, many years, I think we're still in the second inning with regard to fully discovering, how it can be used, how we're going to monetize it. I think that, we're going to see, or at least I hope we're going to see in the next 12 months, a dramatic increase in the metrics that are able to be provided. And with that comes much better measurement in terms of how we measure our content and also any partners for client integrations that go with it. And then, I do feel we have a bit of a leg up, especially for our radio stations across the country, because they've been dealing with audio purely for many, many years. And when we ask ourselves, could we use the broadcast extension to, create a brand? The answer is absolutely yes.
And Jen, in terms of the CBC, I know metrics have often been the issue, or one of the issues with podcasting, because so much of the consumption is on iTunes or Google or other platforms. Is that changing?
It is. There's movement in the right direction, and I think that we're seeing a lot more cross-collaboration between publishing partners in that space to try to move the needle further, knowing that particularly for advertisers, verified metrics are important before they're going to invest in a big way. So yeah, there's movement in that direction, and I mean, even client-side tools like Apple Analytics has been helpful for us to see that completion rates in this content, is very strong, which is, lends a lot of credence to anybody who's doing mid-roll advertising, having confidence that that ad is indeed being heard. So we're starting to see some of it, and I think there'll be more of it. I think there'll be a lot more in the next 12 to 18 months because there is a big push. But to your first question, absolutely. I mean, CBC, we are having great success in monetizing podcasts now. This has been a big focus area for us. Even though we have been making the digital file of our audio programs available for well over a decade, we relaunched the ad offering around them about 2 years ago. And so since we've done that, we've had tremendous interest. And we do see an evolution of even the advertisers that are interested. Initially, it was a lot of just digital-first companies that wanted to advertise in this space, but more and more, especially over the last year, we've seen more blue chip and more traditional advertisers inquiring. Automotive, financial, those guys are interested now too. So we've been doing a lot of work to bring them up to speed on what the medium can do for advertising. So.
And Mladen, in terms of, there are challenges around stitching ads into podcasts. Obviously, Google's very big in the display and pre-roll businesses. What is Google's approach to podcasting monetization?
Well, I can start by sort of just talking broadly. I think when we look at podcasting, I think we see this as a growing opportunity. I think there's a generational shift. When you look at some of the younger generations, they're really starting to look at podcasting as a content source, and so there's a lot of excitement, I think, from advertisers to get there. The problem is that when you look at the technologies today that serve ads in those environments and the technologies that measure ads and around it, it's still early. I think where for Google, we've made a pretty big investment on the broadcast side through our dynamic ad insertion product, where we dynamically insert ads into broadcast streams. I could imagine, over time, we'll deploy some of those similar technologies to audio streams as well. And I think that, just broadly speaking, I think that's probably where it needs to go, particularly as we start to see the growth of programmatic and as a key driver of revenue and how advertisers are starting to deploy their advertising dollars. I think the technology infrastructure is going to be necessary for that to work. And I think it's in development now. But I feel like it's all kind of coming up together. And yes, podcasting's been around for a long time, but I think we're really seeing a surge right now. So expect lots of technology companies, not just Google, to, I think, invest heavily in that area.
Okay, well, maybe moving on from podcasting, but sticking with discussing programmatic, that's sort of a term that has some negative connotations with people, the sense that, direct selling was more lucrative and programmatic kind of killed some of that. But make the case that programmatic is, again, an area that premium publishers should be looking at. Mladen? Whoops. Sorry, I was Siri.
Speaking of technology, well, look, I think if you look at the digital space, it's evolved heavily over the last few years. And I think when programmatic first started, it wasn't a place where premium advertisers and premium publishers played because the values were too small. It was Sense. It was long-tail publishers working with really small advertisers, and in some cases, not even reputable advertisers to drive online ads. Over time, what we've seen happen is we've seen premium advertisers come to the market and say, look, we want to be able to buy advertising efficiently on the digital side, and these buying tools have been made available for us to do that. And, as the premium advertisers came in, so did the premium publishers. But what's had to happen across the board is that the platforms that support this buying and selling have had to mature. And what we've seen over the last few years is as the premium advertisers and the premium publishers have come to the table, the platforms that support them have also improved to create better experiences for those types of advertisers and the premium nature of those brands, right, on mutual sides. So if you look at the CPMs that have happened, in programmatic, there's been a steady and rapid increase over the last 5 years in terms of what the effective CPMs are that you're able to drive. And you've seen that we've moved from these purely auction-based environments to more of a premium marketplace model where you have direct sales teams who are involved. But it's mixing the programmatic with the sales team, and that's where we're seeing it all come together. And I think what you're going to continue to see is increase in effective CPMs over time, as long as sort of you have sales teams that are integrated into that process and able to sell their properties. Part of programmatic is about buying against performance ads, and it's okay to be across long-tail sites. But a big part of it is how do we fill the funnel when we start thinking about brand awareness. There needs to be a direct relationship between a seller and a buyer still.
And I think to add to what Mladen is saying, everything that you're talking about is what we've experienced on our end as a broadcaster. And had you asked me this question 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know if I would have said it, but I've told you I was very scared because we were getting a lot of push from advertisers who were saying, I can get, a lot more reach for a fraction of the price, et cetera. We're thrilled that the pendulum really has swung quite far back. And now, programmatic, we've integrated it where you can, buy all of our Bell properties through programmatic buying. And in some cases, Mladen was talking about the effective CPM, we're actually getting higher rates than some of our direct sales rates. So that concern in terms of, losing money isn't that big of a concern anymore. There is still that world out there where there are the frequency buyers, but we're fortunate in that a lot of the big agencies, a lot of big buyers, and then for us also on the local end, that'll trickle as well, as we always see it follow a little bit later, in that they're saying we're willing to pay more, knowing that we're on a safe environment with a premium publisher.
And are we seeing that? Because we, certainly earlier today heard a lot about the importance of trust and how that's really what the audience is looking for. And so trusted brands, it's important to maintain that, and that trusted brands then maybe should be able to monetize the audience more effectively than just random eyeballs. Are we seeing that trust is really a revenue generator?
I mean, it's hard to distill that down as the single factor. We certainly, on the topic of direct sales versus programmatic, the two, it's not an either or, it's a both. Direct sales teams are selling the full gamut of advertising options, whether or not the client wants to transact in a digital way through programmatic or through direct sales. And so I think the two work hand in hand. And we're seeing interest in CBC as an advertising environment overall. And we absolutely do market ourselves to our clients as a trusted and safe environment. So I'd like to say that that's a key factor that's going into our digital sales success and our growth year over year. But it's hard to distill it to one factor.
I would say that, I think advertisers want to be in environments where they feel safe. And when you look at the programmatic space, you have fairly large advertising exchanges that have lots and lots of different types of publishers and lots of long tail publishers. Every ad exchange does something, operates their platform in different ways. We certainly take the strictest probably sort of approach to making sure that we have quality publishers in our network and in our exchange. And when buyers are thinking about buying, they're now, I think more than ever, starting to control that. Where once they would have just bought openly across an entire exchange, they're now using whitelists and blacklists depending on how conservative they want to be. And the reality is that's benefiting premium publishers. And it's not just that, but I think the platforms have also gotten better. And I shouldn't say platforms. I think the industry has gotten smarter. Last year we announced ads.txt, which I won't go into depth on what it is, but essentially it's a piece of text that you put onto your site that allows. To simplify it, allows buyers to understand whether or not you are actually an authorized site to purchase on. So, there is a lot of spoofing where you might say, I want to buy on Global News. Global News is available in 7 different exchanges when they're really only available in 2, right? And so there was a lot of that type of fraud. Ads.txt solved a lot of that. But that's just one small thing in an industry that's trying to get better and smarter about solving some of these fraudulent issues. And every time we do something like that, we make a step function improvement in creating more value for publishers, because then the dollars start to fall back to where they should have been going in the first place.
And I don't know what the crowd is that we have here today, if you're direct sellers, if it's more local or national. But for us, in terms of, again, exactly what you're saying, we were up against people saying they were getting the Bell Media Network, and it was before we ever opened up our programmatic exchange. And literally, we would have clients send us screenshots saying, "I'm buying it, I'm getting this through my agency," and we were baffled because we're like, "We're not even open for business. How is this possible?" So we would press the issue, and in that case, once we communicated to them that we weren't even open for business, so how could this be, and just asked them to come back, they sort of fell off, and we never heard from them again in terms of what that was. But it's really tough. I don't know if any of you experience it as well, but it's tough when you are open for business. We still get that, but we always look back at that example going, okay, guys, let's take a look into this. And we're fortunate because it is so transparent that we literally can get our programmatic expert to go and look at who exactly bought, what the ads were, everything, and we can come back and say, actually, you thought you were purchasing Bell Media properties, but you weren't getting them at all.
Maybe another area to look into is just voice activated. We've seen a lot of momentum in that with Alexa launching. Google's product's already been in Canada for a while. A lot of questions around that. There doesn't seem to be a lot of data coming out of those platforms. There's clearly audience there, but your brand is not necessarily that present in the same way that it is when it's visually a website. And then the other thing is monetizing this. Is there a direct and easy way to monetize these new voice-activated platforms?
Well, I mean, I would say from a content perspective, as a CBC, absolutely, this is an area that's of great interest, and we've been a launch partner with Amazon in conversational interface, and we are working with Google on how we can surface our content, make it more easily discoverable to users of conversational interfaces. Me as the revenue person on this, absolutely, it's still a bit unclear as to where we're headed, where Google and Amazon will net out in their more official and widespread policies around ad monetization. We certainly see interest from advertisers in being in that space, so we're exploring this now and are very keen to learn more about what the future might be. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't have any big announcements to make, but I think that this is really early. I think we as an organization started looking at voice a few years ago, and the first place that we started looking at that was in our devices. I think it was last year. 20% of searches that happened on Google happened voice activated. And so as an organization, we need to figure that out as well, right? And I think, what's happened is over time, new devices have come out. There's new ways where we're now imagining how voice can incorporate into our lives, into our homes, and it's interesting and exciting. But I think that there's still a lot of work to do to figure out, what's the right format. On Google Home, we have an integration for news. So when you ask your home device or your phone, tell me the news, it'll tell you it'll give you sort of a list of news sources that you as a user get to choose. You get to choose what order of news sources would you like to put into your device, and then you listen to them. Different companies have different approaches to how they use that time in that space. The New York Times has inputs there daily, and that's I think they've built a brand around that. They've taken a slightly different approach. The CBC always starts with what's the term?
I call it our mnemonic.
Your mnemonic,
yeah.
The mnemonic.
Yeah.
And so there's that it's the CBC, and I think you see that with a number of different partners. They're trying to understand how to incorporate that. Some companies also content creators put in ads stitched right into the content, and so I think it's it's early, and I think it's not just us. I think we're all trying to figure out what's the best approach. I think we're setting up ways for people to integrate. We're trying to get some distribution for these devices, as well as other companies. But we're actively working on figuring out what's the future of that user experience. How does that integrate better into your life, right, into your home, and how do we make how do we generate revenue for our partners who are putting that content on?
Right, and kind of what Robin was bugging Mladen about is, because us as broadcasters and people who are going to monetize those platforms, we're very excited, and I think we've all been bitten in the past in our, worlds where we see something new, and so we, pitch a campaign, and then, we get it going, and then, oops, the rules have changed,
Yep.
and we go, oh no, shoot, we wanted to be at the cutting edge, but maybe we ran a little too quickly. So we're really looking to Google, to other providers to determine what their best practices and regulations are going to be so that we can then follow them. And knowing that they're organically going to continue to change, obviously, as everything else does, but how do we do that? And then the other challenge for us, I know on the iHeart side right now, looking at these voice-activated speakers, making sure that if someone wants to listen to Chum FM, well, what if they say Roger and Marilyn? What if they say, it's almost like adding meta tags, like you would on your site, but these are voice-activated. Yep. So it's like, what are all the allowances? So kind of almost like your search engine, rules you would then use into this audio context, and there's so many different ways to be able to put that in, and you want to be first. So please don't institute a bidding measure is all I'm going to say.
Well, and the other thing too is like when we talk about the evolution of these devices. Like today, you might have a Google Home device, an Alexa device. But increasingly, we're connecting those to screens. We're trying to create environments where you can, speak to the system and have the content that you're looking for displayed where you want it to be, right? So, while today, there's a specific, news integration for audio in Google Home, there are casting capabilities to bring up, different types of content from different types of sites on a video basis as well. And I think it's all going to, again, we're still figuring it out. I think not just Google, but I think we're figuring it out. But it's going to come together over time. And I think it's just going to create a sort of tighter opportunity around how you can access content in your home.
So, Robin, you work a lot in branded content. It's we certainly see it's a popular area, but it's also quite a resource intensive one. I'm sure some of the audience comes from local and in some cases small markets. Just thoughts on branded content, and especially how can you come up with products that work in smaller markets?
Yeah, and I mean, again, there's no simple answer for that. If you're going to produce content or creative, and you want it to be successful, as in you want Canadians to want to interact with it on any kind of scale, you will have to do it properly. And so I think the first question to ask yourself is, what expertise do you have and what resources do you have that you could bring to the table that would be of value to the advertisers? So if your background is in editorial written content and you have expertise there, then ask yourself if that could transfer over. I also want to say, as talking to a news audience comes as no shock, that you need to put your audience first and foremost in the trust you've already built up with them and be very transparent if you move into the branded content or native space. I will say we don't do native with our editorial journalists in any way, shape, or form. So you need to make sure that the audience is very clear when it is branded content and who the advertiser is and who's behind it. So take that for granted. But in terms of making it scalable, what I see is a lot of production stakeholders and publishers looking at what latent assets they have. So whether or not they have studio space or people resources that could be put to use for branded content, and that can help bring the ROI down then, as opposed to having to go out and source those assets or hire people to do it, which would obviously make the margins tighter and harder to achieve. I would also say there's a real range of products that you can offer the marketplace. There's different models of doing branded content. The most resource heavy and the hardest ROI is going to be if you're creating filmic quality, cinematic quality video. However, you can also do cheap and cheerful native articles for a lot less. So having a variety of products is key. And also asking yourself whether or not you actually have to produce the content. We see a lot of advertisers, we work with a lot of advertisers who have PR companies or creative agencies who are producing content for them already. And what they're looking to media companies for is ways to distribute that content. Forbes is probably the best known for giving license to the publishing platform to their advertisers. So they're not actively building the content that populates it, they're giving the keys to the car to brand partners and being very transparent that this section is brought to you by one of our partners. And so there's different ways in that can help to keep the costs in check. That'd be my 2 cents.
Interesting. So in some cases, you're sort of sharing some of the existing resources there that might have gone into the news programming or into other programming, but making that available, that extra capacity, that off-hour capacity, just sort of leverage that intelligently, but still kind of keep a church and state there.
Absolutely. So, yeah, you don't want to ever do anything that would jeopardize the trust that you've got with your audience. So transparency is key. You never want to do anything that could be construed as disguised advertising, and we hold ourselves to a very high standard on that regard at the CBC, and we have very consistent and clear labeling of all branded content.
Now with radio, I have to say you can have a little bit more fun. It's a bit. I'm sure anyone who's worked in radio knows we do things a little more off the cuff. I mean, same thing with our CTV properties. It's very much church and state. Although I'm always pushing the weather guy because I feel like he's a little untrustworthy anyway. Like, are we really going to hurt his credibility? with calling the weather. But in general, we have properties on radio where we do things and I go, oh my gosh, like can we even necessarily do that? And they do it with, an iPhone, production quality YouTube. And to be honest, they actually get sometimes better results. I mean, there's times that we will tap into CTV, but in terms of their production house and see if we can leverage their studio to do some things. But a lot of the times it is literally our DJ who is either live broadcasting or taping something on their iPhone, like one person, a selfie stick, whatever it happens to be. And some of those are our most impactful campaigns. And I think a part of it is you have to be transparent. I mean, the audience can sniff fake, from 100 yards away, and they really, they admire their, the announcers and the people they watch. And obviously for news, you have to keep a bit more church and state. But when I'm listening to radio, I want to be entertained. I want to laugh, and I want to say, "Oh my gosh, they're so silly." And so we can do some silly things, and I think they'll give us a pass a bit in terms of the quality of it. So I would say have some fun and just practice it and see what your team thinks of it.
Yeah. And you raise a good point about the audience, that the best branded content is where thanks to this brand partnership, you're able to offer your audience something that they wouldn't otherwise get. So really high quality content or an entertaining experience, or a lot of brands will take an altruistic, there's a philanthropic angle, they're making a donation to a good cause type of thing, or making somebody's wish come true, that sort of idea. And the audience likes that, and they welcome in those sorts of brand messages because they're getting something, or they can see others getting something that they wouldn't have otherwise, thanks to the brand partner. And that's a win-win for publisher and brand partner and audience.
I guess that's when it works best, when you're sort of kind of both helping each other's brands. You're not having conflicts there. So we've got the Google Cube here. If anyone has any questions, just raise your hand, and we'll be happy to take them.
I'm curious to know. Robin, I'm curious to know about the branded content. Do you use content that's provided for you on your sites at this point?
At this point, we don't host on cbc.ca, but we do have ad units that can click. We have solutions that can click out to clients' content.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because it's something that we've grappled with, or we get a lot more of requests right now on with CTV, and we don't do it either yet, but I know that it's a request that comes now.
That comes a lot. Yeah.
From Jen. Hi,
Yeah.
Jen.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question, extension to the conversation that we are having about different formats. Yeah. So for an audience that's largely focused on programming in this room, what kind of trends are you seeing in addition to what you've already spoken about that advertisers are looking for by way of content choices or stories or different types of formats, like you said, with the selfie stick and having fun? What else can you share with us from your experience that we could think about in terms of programming styles?
I'm not going to try to say to a room of programmers, what a superior programming strategy would be, because that is outside of my wheelhouse, or content strategy. You guys are the experts in that. But more on maybe platform opportunities. I'm really excited to see the different types of storytelling formats that are, in particular, our news department is doing. They're quite on the forefront of different touch points out. And so where I'm going is, they're doing a lot of experimentation in social channels right now, and they're not just lifting that TV broadcast and putting it out in those channels. They're actually asking, what is the user experience that the audience expects in that channel, and how do I do optimal storytelling and formatting of my story in those channels? And I think that's really interesting from an advertising standpoint too, because then we get a whole host of touch points to offer our client base in ways to reach the audience of CBC News. So that's one thought I have.
And I'd echo that for CTV. And actually, Liz has helped us in terms of, we're always trying to push the envelope as much as we can while staying within the boundaries of what's allowed. But pushing things out onto social media, when it's a good story, making sure that we actually just right now are doing an experiment with a very high social media strategy. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but it's really creating a lot of traffic coming back to our sites. And then working on some, custom content where it still has the editorial integrity. That is a bit of a more costly one. But those are some of the things you can do within the news division. But if other people have ideas, we're certainly willing to hear them as well.
Sorry, I'll answer the question from a slightly different perspective. So I manage sort of publisher relationships for Canada for Google. And so, my entire world is helping publishers figure out how to better monetize and create better user experiences for their users. And I think, and you touched on it, we should be asking what do the users want to see as well, because over the last few years, as people have migrated to mobile, mobile web in particular, those mobile web experiences have been terrible. And when you couple, poor mobile web experiences, and that could be anything from really slow loading sites to, just like poorly designed user experience on the site, you couple that with a bad advertising experience, people will leave you. And, I think, it's important to really understand what advertisers want, but if you don't get it right with your user base is going to deplete. And I think that should be the scary thing. And I think we've over the last year, I'd say, we've went out and talked to all of our partners, and we have hammered the drum about site speed. As an example, we have done research that shows that we can actually, by the when we look at the speed of your site, we can tell you how much money you're losing every month because of the site speed. We've done a significant analysis globally to determine that, and it's staggering. And so, so there's that component. Also, those really bad experiences lead to more adoption of things like ad blocking. So I think it's the conversation should be about both sides of that. And again, I've been encouraging our partners to really double down on that user experience piece, because that's what's going to keep people there.
Mladen, what's one of the best campaigns you've seen from a Canadian media organization?
Well, I would say that I don't really see the campaigns. My team and I manage the platforms that publishers use to deliver ads on their site, both from a direct sales perspective. So that is the high impact, really custom stuff that a direct sales team will sell, and then separately on the programmatic side and maximizing the opportunity with programmatic. So I don't have a good answer for that one.
Which does the best?
Well, I can say generally speaking, if we're talking about programmatic, video ad units have the highest effective CPMs. They need to be viewable in some way. That'll garner a higher effective CPM for the publisher. Bigger ad units generate higher effective CPMs. What performs for the advertiser is hard to tell, because I don't have visibility into those types of metrics. But typically, bigger is better. But then you have to balance that with the user experience, right? Because people don't want their content blocked. They don't want to open up a site, start reading the content, and all of a sudden, you've got a jumpy ad that is preventing you from reading content. So it's I think you have to sort of look at both sides.
Thank you. My question, you had referred to loading speed and times. Mm-hmm. What is the optimal, what is this time now? Because I guess it changes all the time. What makes people go crazy? Is it half a second or quarter?
No, it's more. I think for us, we would be happy if all of our publishers got it down between 3 and 6 seconds, But, today we still have partners who have some of their sites that are loading in 20, 30.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel 3 to 6 is generous.
Yeah. The big challenge...
Pardon me? But that's the problem.
Yeah. The big challenge there, though, to some extent, is what's slowing the page down often is, to our topic, it's the analytics and it's the ads. Yep. Often. So one of the challenges, everyone wants a fast, efficient site, and the ones that have no ads on them and aren't doing a lot of tracking are very fast and efficient. So it's like weighing those two very different goals and trying to find a solution, I think, is a big part of the
I also
challenge.
think that a lot of people are loading up their sites with lots of third-party, companies that are trying to figure out different ways to monetize, and that is, again, you're trying to balance the revenue needs to the user experience needs, and I think that we've seen that kind of explode, and now we're seeing it come back a lot. So we're seeing, sort of people being more thoughtful around that approach, and we're seeing many more server-side solutions. So you don't have to put as many pixels into or tags onto the page, but it's complicated.
I have one final question, and that's around metrics. And we've had similar panels over the years at this conference speak to journalists about what really is what's gold in terms of advertising, and we were surprised how significant the broadcast numbers still are to the advertising community. Has that changed? Are they starting to consider now other audience metrics, and are you using them when you're selling content?
You can take
Sure. So I guess it's kind of yes to everything. Yes, there's always going to be new products, new platforms that are trying to chip away and take a piece of your pie. I would say that where I was talking about the pendulum swinging with programmatic, we've also seen that with the value of broadcast. And I think a part of it is when digital came out, and I was on the bandwagon. I've been doing digital for many, many years. And that was really the end-all, be-all. It was kind of like broadcast is old, legacy, right, media, they started calling it. And if you're not digital, what are you doing? And so we had this whole generation that's grown up going, oh, that's for older people, I'm going to get on the digital bandwagon. And, again, we're starting to benefit from the pendulum swinging a bit. And it's with education, right? Everything was, the learning curve was so steep, and the new products, it's just exponential. It's tenfold. I mean, the 30-second spot hasn't changed over like decades. But in digital, things are constantly changing. So the second you learn about something, you start to really measure it, to your point, you're on to the next thing. So, did it really work? Did it not? I don't know. I think it did. Everyone tells me it did. So I'm going to join the crowd and say it was great. It was perfect. So now with education following, it's still, I think, a bit behind, but it's starting to catch up to the platforms and the capabilities we have. My conversations, I would say, are much easier with the advertiser because they do know more. It's tougher to work with advertisers who know a very little. I always say I want them to know nothing, or I want them to know everything, because someone with a very small amount of information is going to make a giant decision with not a lot to necessarily back it up. So we actually are fortunate in that we're starting to be able to show, and even, we do partner with Google, and there was a time I brought someone from Google agency in-house to say, I think we're going to set up our own shop. Since then, we've started to feel the power of our own products, in broadcast, and what's cool is we can show that with a broadcast campaign, the Google search will increase. So that's kind of the reverse of it. So you can search for it, but why don't we increase your broadcast and watch the organic searches increase as well? Does that answer?
And I don't think a lot has changed in that respect, that TV is still a very significant source of advertising revenue for traditional publishers that came from that background anyway. And I mean, the reality of what we're up against in the digital space too is that, digital and TV advertising spend are comparable, and I think digital is now above TV. However, the portion of digital that's going to traditional publishers is small. It's a small pie that we're fighting over, because the reality is that more than 2/3 of advertising revenue does go to Facebook or Google in this country. So digital can't replace that for traditional advertisers. That is a conundrum that we all face.
So I think we're getting close to the end of our time, but maybe I'll just quickly go across the panel for one last thought. If there was one thing that the audience here should be looking out for over the next 12 months, or one area of opportunity, what would you say it was? And maybe we'll just start with Jen.
Sure. I guess the biggest thing is don't forget what you've learned all these years and what you know to be successful when you see new things. It's very exciting. There's so many new things, and it's also very scary. So use the knowledge that you've gained over the years and years and apply it to the new product, apply it to, the new philosophies of things, and then see if it works for you. And also make sure not to bite off more than you can chew. And what I mean by that is because there's so much, it's tough to know where where to focus your time, because it could take you 2 years to really get there if you go down a certain product line. So, you have to really pick and choose, be willing to experiment. But again, the biggest is, the lessons you've learned and the knowledge you have, don't throw it out the window.
Mladen?
I think I just go back to my comments around user experience. I think that's really important. I think if you don't do a good job there, if people can't have a hard time navigating your site, reading your content, if you don't, it won't matter that you're creating great content, because they're just going to bounce before they have an opportunity to hear it, see it, read it, and it's a big problem. And I think this, again, I've been drumming this beat for a year with my partners, but like, let's work on this and let's fix it, because I think it is long term. It's going to be it's going to be a problem if they don't fix it.
And Robin, what are you watching?
There's lots of irons in the fire. I'd say we are working as an organization on more effective mobile advertising products for our advertising base. But things that I get excited about are actually sort of this convergence of media types with connected TVs. So it's digital advertising, but now on a more traditional screen. And with our launch of our TV app, or relaunch of our TV app, I'm excited to see the expansion of reach that we can do in devices like connected TVs, and how you're saying that conversational interfaces will become screens and then bigger screens. And so there's sort of a conversion of technology that's happening, and I'm excited about that.
They would say the Internet of Things.
Yeah, everything.
Well, that is an exciting note to end on. Well, my thanks very much to Jennifer Bergen, Robin Neufeld, and Mladen Raickovic for an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. We appreciate your contribution.
Thank you.
What's happening next in here will be the annual general meeting of RTDNA, so please stay with us for the board and the election of the new board members.
Thank you.